FM, broadcasting from the hub. Here's Henry, and we also have Darren in the studio as well.
It's a very good morning, Henry, and our listeners out there. I hope you're having a great start to your Saturday, or if you're overseas, it might still be Friday.
Exactly. It's been a huge week in sport, especially in the AFL. Despite the fact the grand final finished 2 weeks ago, it seems like the news has actually picked up even more so than we saw during the season. And yesterday and the day before that, we've had the ginormous bombshells about the Western Bulldogs. Unfortunately for them, they had the logo, they launched their logo on Wednesday, and everything was positive, and they were talking about the future and looking forward about the years ahead. And just literally one day later, their captain announces that he wants to go to GWS, which was a massive shock to everyone. No one saw that coming. And then literally the same day, the coach decided to resign. So it was, obviously a traumatic period for the Western Bulldogs. And when your coach and captain both decide to leave, it's obviously going to be a pretty horrendous few weeks for them. And hopefully they can recover it next year, but it's not a good sign for the club and their culture and the way that they operated this year. If the captain decided to leave the club and the coach had no alternative in his mind to stay, so yeah, pretty disastrous few days for them.
Oh, absolutely. Now, do you think that opens up another possibility for the Suns as another possible coach for the Suns?
I would think that they would probably steer clear of him. I would think that the Cardinals probably got a good chance of picking up an assistant coach position somewhere. Obviously, there's quite a few clubs that want a new assistant coach. The Crows, with their new head coach, are looking for probably a new football department and a new coaching panel. Obviously, Port Adelaide lost Phil Walsh to Adelaide, so they need a senior assistant to replace him. And Essendon are a bit up in the air in regards to their coaching panel makeup as well. So I'm sure McCartney would be, probably got a good chance of getting a job somewhere as an assistant coach. But I think we've seen in recent past that if you're a senior coach and you get the sack, or even if you resign of your own, decision, you're very, very unlikely to get a new job somewhere else. So, he's still got a good prospect of being appointed somewhere in another club, but I would think that his chances of being a head coach are probably over.
Right, yeah, it seems to be once you've been sacked or you leave of your own fruition, it seems to be poison. No one wants to touch you.
No, exactly. And, quite a lot of the discussion about McCartney was that he didn't communicate with the players very well. And it seems like most of the senior players didn't really appreciate or respect his coaching. Then he had the support of some of the younger players, but his, obviously going into next year, it would have been difficult to have either him at the club with the senior players there, considering they didn't get along at all. So they really only had two choices. They either had to trade away the senior players that were disaffected with the coach, and one of them was obviously Griffin, or they had to sack the coach and hopefully, retain most of the senior players that they have there. But you could argue that if the senior players don't want to be at the club like Griffin does, then trying to keep them is probably not the best course of action to go with, and especially if the Bulldogs could get up, upwards of 2 first-round picks, or even if they do get 1 first-round pick inside the top 10 of the draft, while it's still clearly a disaster that your captain wants to leave. If you want to get rid of players that don't want to be there, and you know that you're going to get the top 10 draft pick back, then that might be the only alternative that you've got. So, obviously a very tricky situation for them, and they're stuck between a rock and a hard place really, but they've got to make the best of this situation, and getting rid of Griffin looks like it's, while they're publicly saying they want to keep him, I don't think they'll. I think it'll be probably unlikely if that he'll be on the list by the end of next week, by the time trade period finishes. So, it's a shocking, 2-day period for them, and something that's fairly unprecedented for a player to, for a captain to leave. That hasn't happened for quite a while. And not only is the captain leaving, but he's also leaving to go to GWS. And that's a bit of a slap in the face for the Bulldogs, considering they're in a sort of similar situation with the Giants, in that they're a young team that are probably considering, rising up the ladder. So, the last few days for them has been pretty disastrous.
Definitely. Now, just looking at our local paper, the Advertiser, there's a picture of Hinkley and McCarthy. Could that be? How do we take that as, well, he's heading to Port Power, or is that just?
I think that's probably just so the photo on the paper today is from when Port Adelaide played the Bulldogs in a exhibition game over in England. But you'd have to say that Port would considered picking him up, because he was clearly a well-respected assistant coach, and even if head coaches do fail and do get the sack, that doesn't necessarily mean that they were poor assistant coaches either. So the position of an assistant coach is quite different to a head coach, and the role and the responsibilities of a head coach are quite different. So I would still think that McCarthy and even other Sanderson and McKenna, who both got the sack at Adelaide and Gold Coast, I think if they both got assistant coaches' jobs, they would still do a fairly good job for their new clubs if they do get appointed somewhere else. So, yeah.
Yes, well, I guess we'll just have to wait and see. You said is there another week or another 2 weeks in the trade period?
So trade period ends next week on Thursday. So we've still got another week or so to go. So I think there's a bit of confusion over whether deals can be done on the weekend. But I do know that free agency finishes tomorrow. So I would think if the clubs are still able to sign free agent players, then you'd have to think that they would be able to complete trades as well. So we've got, what would you say, Saturday, Sunday, and then so probably another 6 days left of trade period. So still a lot to play out, and so far we've only had 3 trades completed, and we've still got another sort of 20 or so players that have announced their intention to leave. So I would think the next week would be quite exciting period for off-season moves, I would say.
Absolutely, and there's a lot of stories, and it's very interesting, this trade period.
Yeah, I think it's pretty unprecedented, the number of players that have announced to leave, and not only have they announced to leave, but we've got players that are announcing to leave that are under contract as well. So we've got quite a few players that are, still have a year or 2 to go at their current club, and yet they have announced that they want to go somewhere else for whatever reason. I mean, Christensen wants to go to Brisbane, Griffin wants to go to GWS, and when you think about the fact that both of those teams are probably not in premiership contention, some of the reasons for players to leave are varied, and I think it just shows that this is the new era that AFL's in.
Absolutely.
So we'll just take a break and go to a promo, and then we'll come back and talk about Dane Beams' situation in regards to his potential trade to Brisbane.
In the heat of the action, every choice you make has a huge impact.
You've got to make the right decisions. If you want to be a game changer,
you can't afford to take unnecessary risks
or rush into something that you might regret.
Whether you're in heavy traffic
or you've got room to move,
you still have to be in complete control.
Just one decision, one small thing,
one lapse in concentration,
and your whole world could change.
Welcome back. Earlier in, even before trade period began, we had Collingwood star and Best and Fairest winner from 2 years ago, Dane Beams, announced that he wanted to move to Brisbane or move to Queensland mainly to be with his sick father, and he's originally from Queensland, and his brother plays for Brisbane, and he was wanting to move to Brisbane with 1 year to go on his contract, and Collingwood were wanting a player and a good draft pick, and Brisbane were only willing to give up pick 5 and pick 25. So so Collingwood knocked that back last night and gave Brisbane until the end of yesterday to accept the deal, and they knocked it back. Collingwood knocked back Brisbane's offer. So it looks like that Collingwood are not going to deal with Brisbane anymore, and maybe he will move to the Gold Coast, but you would think that it's probably an unfortunate situation with Beans because of the fact that he wanted to move to Brisbane to be with his sick dad. But sometimes clubs can be a bit stubborn in wanting to keep star players, even when they've got sort of legitimate reasons to go. And I was of the opinion that Collingwood's potential offer from Brisbane was pretty good. Well, not pretty good, but probably good enough to accept. So I would have thought that what Collingwood wanted was probably overs for someone of Beans' output. Beans is a very good player, and he's a young star of the competition. But to want to have 2 top 10 draft picks basically in pick 5 from Brisbane, and then potentially James Age, who went pick 7 last year, to me that just seems like too much of an ask for Brisbane to give up. So I would say full credit to Brisbane for not giving in, and we'll see what happens in the next week or so.
Oh, definitely. Do you think there needs to be a system or a bit more of a fair way in the trade if a player wants to move like interstate? We'll take Bean's situation, for instance. He's not just going into another club for money. His father's not well, and he wants to do with his father. Do you think there needs to be a better system in that case?
It's a bit tricky because of the fact that Beans is under contract. So if he was out of contract and he knew that he would be able to leave Collingwood at the end of the year, regardless of any trade, then it would be okay. But because Beans has still got a year to go with Collingwood, if Collingwood aren't happy with the deal, then for Beans, I guess he's sort of stuck with, he could refuse to play for them, but that would be a pretty unprecedented course of action to take. So I doubt that would happen, but at the same time, you can't force someone to leave. That's the problem. So it's tricky. Collingwood probably should have accepted the deal, but at the same time, they have a player of enormous worth, and they don't want to give him up lightly. So it'll be interesting to see whether Beans does stay at Collingwood this year and whether they are able to keep him at the end of next year, or if he seeks to trade again, and he would know that he would be out of contract at the end of next year, and he could go to whichever club he wanted without a trade at all.
Because then he'd fall under the free agent status.
He's not a free agent at the end of next year, but because he would be out of contract, he would be able to just go straight to the draft if he wanted to.
Right.
Or, they could still do a trade, but Collingwood basically would have to accept something because they know that they wouldn't be able to hang on to him for another year. So
right. Okay. Yep.
And Beans' sort of dissatisfaction with Collingwood's situation showed when he decided not to attend the Best and Fairest. So it's tricky to have someone on your list when you know that they don't want to be there. So we've got that with Griffin at the moment, and we could have that with Beans next year as well. So hopefully they can do a trade with Gold Coast so that he can still go home, but at the moment it's looking unlikely, I would say.
Right. Well, I guess as I said before, it's just one of the many stories that are still to be played out with the last week and a bit of trade.
Collingwood gave a sort of arbitrary deadline yesterday afternoon, The trade period doesn't end until next week, so I can't imagine Brisbane budging on their offer, so I don't think that's going to happen. But you never know, Gold Coast might come out and say, we'll give you pick 8 and then we'll give you one of our youngsters as well. So that could certainly happen. And clearly Gold Coast have got a lot of youngsters on their team, so if they lost someone, it probably wouldn't hurt them as much as what it would hurt Brisbane. So it's still got a week to play out, but it's going to be an awkward situation next year if Beans does stay at Collingwood and we've got a player on the list that doesn't want to be there at all.
Yeah, if you'd rather have a team of players that are happy at a club and want to play for the club and not just have a player that's on the list and doesn't really want to be there.
Yeah. I guess it's difficult to avoid if Collingwood are that keen to keep him. But it's going to be interesting what Beans says, publicly, because clearly he's not going to be happy with the situation he's in at the moment. So it's going to be an interesting 2015 for Collingwood and Dane Beans if he does stay on the list.
Absolutely. You're listening to Ozsports FM with Henry and Darren.
We'll just lead into a song and then we'll come back and talk about the AFL's decision to block the Swans from being able to trade players in. Welcome back, everyone. A few days ago we had another big bombshell in the AFL with the AFL's decision to block Sydney from being able to trade in players. No one saw that one coming. Emma Quayle broke that on the Age, and that sent Twitter alert quite. Twitter went gangbusters after that went out as well after the situation with Bulldogs early in the morning, and it's pretty unprecedented for the AFL to actually enforce a rule blocking a team to actually trade in players, especially when they haven't necessarily broken any rules. So the AFL's ruling was that they're not allowed to trade in any players, and if they do, that they'll lose the ability to use the cost of living allowance on any player's contract until it is phased out completely in 2 years' time. So the AFL allowed the Swans to retain the cost of living allowance until the end of 2016, I believe, and the AFL decided that to allow the Swans to reduce the cost of living allowance to zero, they would prevent them from trading in any players. So if the Swans wanted to trade in any players, the AFL would obviously be believed that the Swans would use the COLA on those players' new contracts as well. So it seems like they're making up along the way. Some of these rules are a bit, seem to be made on the run. So I'm not sure I necessarily agree with it, but you can sort of understand the AFL thinking that all the clubs are against the cost of living allowance, and there's a massive hullabaloo over it. But it seems pretty crazy to think that the AFL have actually blocked a team from trading in players when the cost of living allowance is actually a rule that the league initiated in the first place. So the Swans haven't necessarily broken the rules, and yet they're prevented from trading in any players for the next 2 years.
Oh, definitely. And you were just talking about how it went berserk on the Twitter. I've just got some Twitters up here from John Kehoe. Extraordinary nanny state at AFL ban at Sydney Swans trades. If COLA is flawed, don't remedy with distortionary policy. Another one from Luke Edmonds. Ridiculous ruling by the AFL on COLA for the Sydney Swans. And last off, from Anthony Weldon, regardless of whether COLA exists or not, the Sydney Swans are being banned from trading is grossly unfair. And that's just a handful of some of the Twitters.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like to block a team from trading in players when the rule was put in by the AFL in the first place, and while they might have been a bit sneaky in using part of the cost of living allowance on players like Franklin and Tippett, they never broke the rules, and for them to be prevented from recruiting any players outside of using the draft for a rule that was initiated by the AFL in the first place, it just seems quite far-fetched and something that goes against the spirit of the rules in the first place, where you can just make up rules along the way, sort of thing. So the Swans aren't happy. They were pretty angry, and they posted a few statements on their club website, and I'm sure they'll survive because their list is one of the best in the league anyway. But still, it seems like a fairly unprecedented decision for a league to block a team to bring in players when they haven't broken any rules.
Oh, definitely. Just got an article up here on the AdelaideNow.com.au website, and this is from three-time premiership captain Michael Voss has labelled the AFL's trades ban on the Swans a joke. It says they have been treated like they have brought the game into disrepute. It's a joke, Voss told the Daily Telegraph. So
yeah, there's quite a lot of people that are angry with the decision. I can't see the AFL backclicking on it because clearly they were thinking about this for quite a while. But quite controversial in the end. So we'll take another promo and then we'll come back and talk about the Crows.
If you can run,
You can run.
If you can kick,
You can kick.
if you can score,
You can score.
Whether a person is gay or straight,
Shouldn't matter in sport.
Ability, attitude,
and effort is what counts. If you can play,
You can play.
if you can play,
You can play.
If you can play,
you can play.
Welcome back. On Tuesday afternoon, we had the Crows announce their new coach, Phil Walsh from Port Adelaide, who was Port's assistant coach for this year, and from 2009, I believe, to 2013, he was the assistant coach for West Coast, and before that, he was assistant coach at Port Adelaide for quite a while, from 1999 to 2008, I believe, and he was one of the main pillars of Port's most successful years between 2001 and 2004. So he's fairly lauded by a lot of players, a lot of people in the AFL industry. And as a Crow supporter, I was very impressed with his opening press conference on Tuesday. It sounded very knowledgeable and very team orientated. Not going to mess around with any sort of irrelevant, stuff. Straight. Not gonna get messed around with irrelevant like irrelevant stuff. So very excited as a Crows fan and looking forward to the next few years, I would say.
Yeah, I know it's 2014 season's just finished, but I'm kind of hankering for the 2015 season to see what he brings to the Crows.
Exactly, and you have to think that he seems pretty driven on finding out exactly why the Crows did struggle this year. He mentioned about interviewing all the sort of key staff of the club and all the players and sort of trying to find out why the Crows were inconsistent and why they sort of struggle in defence. And he mentioned that if you're going to be a premiership team, you need to be in the top 5 for attack and top 5 for defence. So the Crows were okay in attack, but they finished 11th on the ladder for defence. So clearly that's an area for improvement. The defence these days is not necessarily just the back six. It's the entire team and how much pressure they apply on the opposition and the ability to lay tackles and stuff like that. So there's quite a bit of room for the Crows to improve on. They only really need one extra win next year to sort of make the finals. But I would think these now with the new coach, it's not necessarily about making finals next year, but it's about rebuilding the team, coming up with a football department that is well resourced and actually going full tilt at actually winning a premiership and not necessarily just trying to make finals every year and sort of hope for the best once September comes around. So it seems like that's sort of the Crows' mantra in the past, in that they just sort of hope that they continue to be successful or moderately successful, and then once finals comes around, it's sort of like let's start again and let's sort of, as long as we sneak in, anything can happen. But I think these days in the AFL you need to have you need to be sort of well resourced across the entire club, and just finishing in 8th or 7th isn't going to be good enough to reach prelim finals and grand finals and whatnot. So we've seen with the top, especially the top 3 teams, Hawthorn, Sydney and Port, those clubs have got strong lists, they've got good coaches, and they've got they've been recruiting fairly well as well. So quite a lot of work for Phil Walsh to do. And last night we had a few delistings as well. So we had Jared Petrenko and Lewis Johnson were delisted, and Jason Portlegia announced his retirement. So a few more culls from the Crows list, and you would think that maybe there's probably another 1 or 2 more to come in the next few weeks, I would think.
Okay. Any ideas who they could be?
Probably you'd have to think Luke Thompson, maybe Sam Shaw. There wouldn't be many others. Maybe, I would think that probably Brent Riley, maybe. He's a 200-game player, but he was fairly in and out of the team, and for an experienced player, he can make quite a few errors. He's very good with his marking. He's not very good sort of one-on-one defending though, and his kicking can be okay when he's not under pressure, but he is prone to making quite a few errors as well. So I would be surprised if he got delisted because he's quite a respected player at the club. But in regards to actually having a spot in the team, he's on shaky ground, and if he didn't have a contract next year, I wouldn't be surprised if he got culled. So I would think there'd probably only be one or two more, because we've already made six list changes with Paul Fleischer and Rutten retiring. So I think 6 players going would mean that the Crows have at least 3 picks of draft. So 3 picks, which one of them includes Charlie Cameron being upgraded. So you'd have 2 live picks. So I think probably maybe one more. So they've got 3 live picks and Charlie Cameron being upgraded. So this is the first time in 3 years that the Crows have got a pick inside the top 10 after the Kurt Tippett debacle. So I'm sure they're going to enjoy being back at the draft and being able to recruit someone that's quite talented.
Oh, definitely. Now, Dangerfield, is that totally off the table? Is going to stay at Westlake?
It's 100% off the table this year. I would think that with the new coach, and if the club if he can see that the club is going to be successful in future years, and if he backs in, Walsh's new regime and his, philosophies, I would think that retaining Dangerfield would be a good chance. So he's always mentioned that he only wants to stay, or he wants to win a premiership. He's not necessarily driven by money. I'm sure he would like more money, but his overall goal is to win a flag, and if he can see that winning a flag at the Crows is a good chance, then he would stay. So, but at the same time, he knows he's a really good player. He knows that he's in demand by all clubs, and I think he realises that there's nothing for him to gain by signing now, when he can still sign with the Crows next year and probably force a few other clubs in a bit of a bidding war, and he can eke out a bit more money by whatever club he wants to join. So as a Crows fan, I'm really happy he stays, but I would think that he's well entitled to wait and see how Walsh sort of operates in the next 6 to 12 months, and also to make as much money as he possibly can. Signing next year is a better decision than signing now. So it's going to be interesting what decision he makes, but we've also got Rory Sloane and Taylor Walker out of contract as well, and but the way they sort of talk publicly and the way they communicate, on interviews and whatnot, it seems like both of them are fairly likely to stay. So Dangerfield seems like the one that is going to be most up in the air, but I'm still confident that he would stay as long as the Crows show that there is a future, to be excited about.
Sounds excellent. Well, as a Crows fan myself, I hope he stays. It's a big part of the Adelaide Football Club.
Well, he's the face of the club, really. Van Merle's the captain, but Dangerfield is the one that's on all the posters, and he's seen in Victoria, was one that's most talked about interstate and whatnot. So yes, I mean, from a pure club image point of view, his staying is crucial for membership, promotion, sponsorship, not only, and that's not even including the actual, success of the team, in the future years. So, yes, he's a very important player for the Crows to re-sign.
Absolutely. You're on Ozsports FM with Henry and Darren. We're going to go to another song, and we'll be right back to talk cricket.
Welcome back, everyone. Last night we had the second ODI between Australia and Pakistan in the United Arab Emirates, and Australia won their second game in a row, sealing the ODI series there. They did it pretty easily in the end. They had 215 to chase, and they did it with about 7 or 8 overs to spare. So they did it pretty comfortably in the end. Pretty impressive performance really for Australia. Pakistan are a poor team, and do so well as a good achievement for them. In the first ODI, I know that Steve Smith scored 100, so that would be pretty pleasing for him, considering he performed so well in the Test series during the Ashes, and to perform in the ODI arena as well is good for him, to establish himself in both forms of the game, especially with the World Cup starting in February next year. So good signs for Australia, but at the same time they did stumble a little bit in the previous series against South Africa and Zimbabwe. So so far 2 good matches, but nothing to get massively excited about, I'd say.
No, there's one more match in the series, not that it's a dead
rubber, but all of these matches are sort of just really warm up the leading games for December, the Test series, and then the World Cup in here in Australia in 2015. So they're all important games, regardless of whether they're live matches or not. But I'm sure they'll all be important for the Australian team going forward.
Definitely. I said Mitchell Johnson claimed 3 scalps, with the other wicket shared evenly between Kane Richardson, 1 for 43, and Xavier Dorothy, 1 for 44, and James Fortnell, 1 for 27, and Nathan Lyon, 1 for 40.
Yeah, Glenn Maxwell was pretty good again. He scored 76, and he showed his ability on both sides, doing quite a few reverse sweeps, playing left-handed practically. So fairly creative batting there, and he's a very inconsistent player. When he's playing well, he looks incredibly good. But when he played a few tests for Australia last year and earlier this year, he was a bit in and out of the side and performing one test and failing the next. So he's pretty good at the one-day format, but sometimes he can let himself down a bit. But hopefully Australia perform well in the next ODI. And I'm not sure what's the next series format for them. Is it are they going straight into the sort of test series against India, or is it have they got anything else coming up? I'm not really sure.
I'm not sure. How about we go to...
Why don't we start talking about the Redbacks as well? So we've got the Redbacks have played 3 games so far in the newly named Matador Cup, and so far they've lost all 3 matches, which is a bit disappointing. They're probably most disappointing with scoring 300 against Victoria and failing to win against the Bigs. 300 was not a bad score, obviously, but just didn't take enough wickets against Victoria, and they were able to establish quite a few partnerships in that game. So far we've had Cosgrove fail twice. He hasn't done much so far in his return to South Australia. So it's a bit of a disappointing start for the Redbacks. But at the same time, I think the depth in Australian domestic cricket is not all that great at the moment, because I know it's currently we've got another game going on between Western Australia and Tasmania, and at one stage Tasmania was 6 for 12, which is unbelievably pathetic, really. So there's quite a few teams that are struggling big time to post competitive totals. I mean, in the Redbacks' last game, South Australia were bowled out for about 140, and Western Australia only just snuck over the line by winning by 3 wickets. So at one stage there, the Redbacks looked like they might have been able to sneak a win despite posting less than 150. So there's been quite a few sort of poor performances by state bodies in the domestic cricket season so far. So probably not a good sign for the depth in Australian cricket at the moment, but still some exciting results so far.
That's right, yeah, not a good start to
the Redbacks. I think, obviously a bit disappointing. It's nice that you get most of the one-day matches in the Matador Cup on Channel 9 on Gem, and an HD as well. Always a big fan of HD. So at least coverage of that competition is fairly regular. But at the same time, Cricket Australia seem to be putting all their focus in Big Bash and Sheffield Shield. So because the Matador Cup finishes in about 15 days or so. So the competition is sort of done and dusted in less than a month, and Cricket Australia sort of want to get it over and done with as quick as possible so that they can get to Sheffield Shield and then play the Big Bash, which is the huge money spinner for the national body.
Absolutely. Do you think Adelaide fans are missing out for not having at least one Matador one-day match? Maybe not at Adelaide Oval, but they seem to play down at Grinnell. I think we're missing out.
It's a little bit disappointing. The series is quite odd in that there's quite a few teams that are playing in states that they're not even based in. So there's been quite a few games being played at the Gabba at the moment between non-Queensland sides, or between sides that aren't from Queensland. So we had South Australia playing all 3 of their games, or 2 of their games at the Gabba. So obviously the crowds for those games are we wouldn't even call them crowds. There's probably less than 100 people at those matches. So not great for attendances, but at the same time it's probably cheaper and easier for Cricket Australia to run a competition like that, having all the teams at the one venue, than having them spread around and travel all around the country, sort of thing. So I'm sure we'll be enjoying the Big Bash when it comes around, and
can't wait for that.
With Adelaide now redeveloped to full capacity, you'd have to think that some of the Adelaide Strikers games would would be getting huge crowds.
Oh, it's going to be massive in the Adelaide Oval.
Yeah, so you'd have to think that they would probably be pushing for 40,000 plus at every game, and that would be quite comfortably probably be the biggest crowd that the Big Bash has achieved so far on a regular basis. So I think some of the Melbourne games might have gotten more than 40,000, but I'm sure the Strikers would be able to consistently pull those numbers every single game with the attraction of Adelaide Oval at the moment.
Oh, absolutely. And just before we went on and talked about the Redbacks, we were looking at Australia and their up-and-coming schedule. On the 15th of October through to the 18th, they've got a 4-day tour match against Pakistan A. That's at the Sharjah Cricket Stadium. And then on the 22nd of October through to the 26th of October, Australia plays Pakistan in the first test.
Okay, so they're playing a test series in Pakistan then. There you go.
Yep. And then the second test is the 30th of October through to the 3rd of November.
So that should be good. Australia returning to the test arena. They haven't played a test since the Ashes, obviously, in January, December. So they've had about 9 or 10 months off from the test format, and after the Pakistani series, we've got the series against India, which is certainly going to be big, and I'm sure the crowds at Adelaide Oval for that will be pretty good as well, along with the Big Bash game. So seeing with the football that crowds at Adelaide Oval this year have been absolutely enormous, and I'm sure with the Eastern Stand now completed, the cricket will, they were pulling in 35,000 during the Ashes, and that was with basically only 2 stands completed. So you'd have to think that they will probably be a good chance of getting some sellouts for, a 5-day test series. So,
absolutely. It should be a great summer of cricket. You're listening to Ozsports FM with Henry and Daniel. We're going to go to a promo, then we're going to come back and talk about gridiron.
Racism
Has no place in sport.
no place in sport.
Everyone
deserves a fair go. Regardless of skin colour, background or culture.
Racism!
It stops with me. It stops with me.
It stops with me.
With me. With me. With me.
Racism! It stops with me.
You're back on Ozsports FM with Henry and Darren. And of course, this afternoon is round 5 of the Gridiron SA League, and it's all happening at Victoria Park in front of that beautiful old grandstand. And there's 2 games today, kicking off at 12 and then the second game at 4. First game is the Uni SA Eagles versus the Southern District Oilers. And that's going to be a really good game, let me tell you. And the second game at 4 this afternoon is the Spartans versus the Chiefs. Sorry, that's the South City Chiefs, and that was should be a very good match. And our man on the ground, Chris Guscott, who covers everything gridiron for South Australia, has given us some predictions. And the Eagles rushed for 175 yards. The main stat to pay attention to is how the Eagles averaged an absurd 250 yards per game against the Oilers last year, with a similar rushing attack, which can be coupled with the Oilers' leaky rush defence so far this year, 173 yards per game. So as enormous as that figure sounds, it's a fairly plausible target for the Eagles to reach. The only roadblock for this prediction is the extent in which the Eagles attempt their passing game against a suspect pass defence. And let's go to another one. Wes McInnes, who plays for the Southern District Oilers, and Proctor combined for 80 plus yards. Wes McInnes' passing record against the Eagles last year wasn't bad, 41 out of 88 for 461 yards, 4 touchdowns, 6 intercepts. But if there's one thing you can take away from that stat line, it's that it manages to accumulate a lot of yards, with the main target, Tennyson, out for the week. Andrew Proctor will be no doubt become the number one man and should be ready to go following his mammoth performance in round 3. 5 catches, 124 yards, 2 touchdowns in one half against the Chiefs. Besides, if the Oilers can simply run another roadhouse play to good effect, this should be more than achievable. So if you've got nothing to do, come on down to Victoria Park and see a couple of great good-on games. Commences at 12 and then the second game at 4. That's this afternoon. And for everything gridiron and everything else sports, make sure you check out the Ozsports online at www.ozsportsonline.com. And on Facebook, you can always send us a message, let us know if you listen to the show. We'd love to have your input and your feedback. It's ozsports.online, and Ozsports FM has their own Twitter, of course. Everything has their own Twitter these days. So it's at Ozsports FM. That's OZSPORTS FM. You've been listening to Ozsports with Henry and Darren on this beautiful Saturday here in Adelaide, South Australia. We thanks for joining in, and we'll be back next week.
See you guys.